Impact trajectories verified. Execute targeting run. No tremor in the voice. No hesitation in the gesture. Emperor Varos stood at the apex of Dominion Bridge 1, hands behind his back, observing the Earth's orbital curvature through a polarized viewport. The blue-white sphere below spun with the calm of indifference. In the command wells below, Stratocode officers tapped inputs with mirrored focus. Pulse arrays locked on to coordinates. Kinetic payloads armed. Earth cities were laid bare. No interference, no shielding frequencies, no response patterns. Varos watched as the planet's equator tilted toward them, revealing clustered metropolises, coastlines outlined by dusk glow, and transport veins blinking across continents. None of it shielded. Not even a baseline defense field shimmered. A military farce. "Drop all three," he ordered. From orbit, the first payload detached, like a silvered fang. Atmospheric drag licked flames along its casing. Target: Viraritas Prime, the cultural heart of Earth. Museums, embassies, forums. Reduced, in 3 seconds, to a white blot across the hemisphere. The visual feed dissolved in chromatic distortion, then recalibrated to display a widening caldera. Seconds later, 2 more fell. One ruptured Halder's coastal barrier, ocean folding inwards like a throat swallowing itself. The third disassembled Varan 6 from its foundations upward. Buildings unraveled molecularly, liquefying mid-suppression under-engineered decay fields. The heads-up display rippled once, then stabilized. Varos narrowed his gaze. Status: Quirk, his senior command analyst, ran a diagnostic. Target saturation complete. Broadcast feeds relayed across 7 sectors. Public footage looping on all core networks. Varos stepped forward. Any planetary distress returns? None. Global net remains passive. No security waves, emergency routing, diplomatic appeals. Parikh blinked. No communications launched, no power-up spikes, no authorization nodes lit. Earth's array hasn't acknowledged us at all. A pause fractured the air. Varos turned away from the viewport and began walking the bridge perimeter. His boots tapped softly against obsidian tile. They're exposed. Either they never had proper defense or they've shut down entirely. One of the junior officers muttered. "Maybe they're waiting." Varos stopped. Waiting is strategy. This is something else. Something unaligned. He didn't finish the thought. A second console technician leaned toward his station. "Broadcast interface confirms planetary pulse integrity. There's no reactive feed. Run multiple sweeps. Monitor crossband delays." "Yes, Emperor." From the mezzanine window, Earth hovered, unchanged. Smoke from impact zones formed curling plumes. 3 massive scars marred the crust. Yet the satellites orbiting the equator remained powered down. Emergency stations inactive. Defense arrays dead. Not damaged. Never engaged. Varos descended the bridge stairwell toward the primary command tier. "Deliver the compliance footage to all observer councils. Label the operation as a demonstration of consequence. Include feed summaries for intersystem negotiations." The aide nodded. "Would you like a second wave prepared?" Varos shook his head once. "No. This one lands heavier without repetition." In the orbital news quadrant of Lurion span, analysts filled network feeds with commentary. Earth's lack of retaliation proves they were bluffing all along. Some are calling it a strategic reset, but let's be honest, this was submission through absence. A broadcast cycled footage of Viraritas's fall on a loop. Flames eating glass towers. Crater winds bending steel like ribbon. Yet amidst the rush of headlines, a minority of voices questioned the obvious. "Too clean," one said. "Too quiet," another whispered. And they weren't heard. Inside the Xanthurian research cortex, a specialist named Valak Hurin sat reviewing deep feed footage. One frame caught his attention. A slowed satellite view revealed an anomaly in thermal spectrums. His trainer flickered deep within the Pacific Trench. Too faint for automated logs to tag. He leaned in. What's down there? The system offered no reply. The data log had no entry, no name, just a mark, unregistered depth, sealed structure. Valak tapped the interface again. The flicker wasn't thermal instability, it was structured. Back on Earth, deep beneath tectonic drift, a sequence unlocked in the ocean vault. No alarms, no ceremony. An arc-shaped relay pulsed once, briefly illuminating a chamber walled in encoded treaty scrolls and sealed infrastructural cores. Across the walls, Terran script interwove with alien dialects, a linguistic mosaic of forgotten diplomacy. Project Archon did not come online with fury. It did not launch retaliatory systems. It assessed, cross-referenced, validated clause active. Then it began to rewrite. Within the neutral axis, Orzmek Halrud reviewed a feed of the planetary strikes from his private chamber. No commentary. No embellishment. Just the raw footage. Smoke still spiraling upward. He paused on a frame. Something behind the destruction unsettled him. He leaned over his interface. Opened the Earth Codex archives. Diplomatic filings, subclause protocols, early neutrality agreements, from 3,200 to 3,400. His aide hesitated. That's over 10,000 treaty files. Then begin now. Inside the council hall of Xantherian Prime, political leaders celebrated. Golden projections of Earth's detonation shimmered across banquet halls. Crystals clinked. Officials made speeches praising the final corrective. Eros watched the celebrations from his private balcony, arms crossed behind him. The skyline burned with decorative banners. No resistance. No response. Only orbital debris flickering like ash in orbit. He said nothing. He noticed something, though. Despite the celebrations, Earth's flag at the embassy gate hadn't torn. It had darkened. Inside the Earth embassy on Droken, the systems remained offline. No interior lights, no human movement. And yet, at the uplink core, a single heads-up display activated. A message appeared across the dark screen. No color, no sender. Just letters, carved like inscriptions into a monument. You broke diplomacy, you broke the universe. Aboard a Xantherian carrier ship stationed near the Veltrian border, systems engineer Dax Morik stared at the flight interface. We lost star chart syncing again, his navigator said. Same on secondary drives. Third Tier 2 archived maps wiped, flight path corruption spreading. Dax frowned. That's not corruption, that's replacement. He tapped a backdoor command. One glyph blinked on the screen. Earth's treaty authorization seal. Flashing once, then vanishing. He leaned back slowly. They're not responding because they're not reacting. He looked out the viewport as the stars shimmered in disconnected vectors. They've already started. Confirmation code received. Burial layer retracting. The words crackled through the comm feed inside the descent capsule as the walls trembled under shifting pressure. Subsea rock peeled back like armor, revealing an obsidian shaft embedded in Earth's crust. Commander Van Tyros, arms folded across his chest, stared at the console display in front of him. Data streamed upward, unlabeled, untranslated, unbroken for centuries. He said nothing. The capsule's vertical momentum slowed, guided now by magnetic grips hidden along the trench perimeter. Outside, layers of seawater coiled like ink, drifting through frozen oil. Visibility narrowed with every meter, light dissolved, and sensor feedback blurred. Inside the chamber, the air thinned, not due to system failure, but the tension tightening between gears and protocol. Tyros touched the control sphere embedded into the frame. Initiate archive relay prime. The heads-up panel responded with a single glyph. Claws, night. A relay pulse shot downward. Below, an ancient vault responded. The corridor lit not with flickers, but with regulated bursts. Each glyph carved into the alloy walls glowed in sequence. Languages etched by hands that no longer existed. each tethered to treaties authored before Earth's interstellar recognition. Glyphs scrolled across support beams like crawling veins. One after another, clauses activated. Not military directives, not strategic targeting. Legal subroutines. Embedded parameters built into peaceful agreements. A station AI emerged from deep j. Authenticate initiator, it requested, voice neutral. Commander Van Tiros, Earth Division 8, Code Protocol Archeon 897, he replied. A brief scan followed. Retinal check, subdermal ID match, voice thread alignment. Confirmed, access granted. No doors hissed, no mechanical whirring followed. Instead, a partition receded without friction. Tiros stepped through, boots striking the hexagonal floor with deliberate rhythm. He entered the treaty core. The chamber was shaped like a collapsed dome, constructed inward toward a spindle housing the treaty servers. Each one submerged partially in cryo-suspension fluid. A lattice of cables looped overhead, pulsing with faint blue glows. No sound echoed, but every detail pressed into the brain like pressure beneath deep water. He approached the spindle, where hundreds of scroll locks rotated slowly, each marked with year codings ranging from 3170 to 3412. A heads-up bracket hovered above the primary lock, waiting. Tiros removed a glass rod from the capsule attached to his belt. It shimmered faintly, inscribed with rotating microtext. Insert treaty key, the spindle stated. He slid the rod into place. Every glyph in the chamber halted mid-rotation, like breath drawn and held. Then the scrolls began to unfurl. Earth hadn't built Archeon for retaliation, it was constructed for inevitability. Each treaty was embedded with logic gates. Terms agreed upon by galactic powers who had, at the time, underestimated the weight of each clause. Humanitarian corridors, AI synchronization protocols, power routing permissions, star chart overlays, all handed to Earth during a century of diplomacy. Now the contracts whispered back. Line by line, the core interpreted agreement violations. Treaty 2149, planetary aggression without prior breach protocol. Clause 9. Agreement bank, enforcement pathways. Trigger, status active. Tiros observed without flinching. He had read these lines as a junior officer decades earlier, when he was told they were ceremonial. Now they restructured galactic law. Behind him, an auxiliary console blinked. A signal, not from Earth's government, not from a military fleet. It was from the vault itself. Encrypted, bound Terran signature. Destination. Treaty link infrastructures across every sector Earth had touched. No warheads, no warnings. Just access codes. Transmit authorized cascade, Tiros said. Are you aware? The AI began. This action will initiate legacy override chains. Yeah, this action cannot be rescinded. Can. He pressed his thumb against the confirmation pad. Cascade locked, initiating glyph drift. The core dimmed, subroutines flooded. Across the vault's dome, the engraved symbols began to reconfigure. They rotated, shifted, and overlaid with new meanings. Not destruction, but erasure of access. Maps would lose their anchors, transit systems would forget their calibration. Logistics AIs would loop into permanent suspension, not because Earth attacked, but because the treaties demanded. Within the spindle's core, one scroll surfaced. Tiros leaned in, eyes tracing the text. It wasn't a war doctrine. It was a food supply clause. Embedded within it, a shutdown trigger, only valid if planetary aggression occurred during peace designation. The date of activation, 20 minutes ago. The clause had waited over 300 years. In a chamber adjacent to the server dome, auxiliary systems detected power draw across known Terran-coded sectors. Entire planetary satellites, dormant for decades, now blinked to life. Not to broadcast, but to mark. Treaty-coded identifiers tagged them as observers. No voice followed. No footage. No feed. They just blinked, marking that Earth had withdrawn permission. Tiros stepped back from the spindle and watched as the data scaffolding shifted. Entire protocols slid into enforcement mode. Sub-clauses previously ignored activated simultaneously, each bound to different systems: supply, transport, AI governance, security, administration. He looked toward the archgate at the chamber's rear. Another door had begun to lower, not from his command, but from schedule. "Show me what it leads to," he said. The AI answered. "Treaty lattice chamber. Legal projection anchors, reserved for continuity uploads." He walked forward. Each footfall carried the weight of generations who had been told Earth would never need these halls. They had been wrong. Back inside the command capsule above the shaft, Officer Keir Voss watched the vault's telemetry spike. He adjusted his console. "Commander's command stream is still live." A heads-up log scrolled across his peripheral. "Treaty classes updating in real time. Redirects active. Legal density measures passed. Compliance. Is this still considered defense?" he muttered. The co-pilot didn't respond. He turned. "What is this, if not war?" Tyros's voice returned through the comm. "This is accountability." Far beneath the vault, in the lattice chamber, red light etched the walls in arcs. Glyphs moved not just in lines, but across dimensions, overlapping through layered coding and claws overlap. Tyros stood at the anchor pedestal, waiting. The AI made one final confirmation. "Outclaw's night index subroutines are stable. Cascades will continue without further input." He nodded once, then asked, without ceremony, "Who else knows?" "Just the dead. Navigation dead. I don't have a single vector holding," barked Captain Isker Varn, gripping the side of his command terminal as the deck lights dimmed and recalibrated again for the third time in 7 minutes. The heads-up display above his helm, once etched with trade lanes, jump coordinates, and alliance corridors, now pulsed with red overlays marked in Terran glyphs. His eyes scanned for any viable route. "Nothing. Try archival layers," he ordered. The navigator beside him swiped across the interface with urgency, but the reply came too fast. "Charts have been revoked, sir. Treaty lockdown protocol flagged the entire deck. It's requesting arbitration metadata from Earth." Isker didn't reply. There was no counter-command. This wasn't sabotage. This was obedience. To a rule no one remembered agreeing to. On the outskirts of Revan Delta Colony, a food transport drone hovered above the landing corridor. Its propulsion system halted mid-descent, still hovering, locked in place. Below it, warehouse doors remained sealed, denying access to the stockpiles within. Inside, logistics controller Barrick Dross stared at the mainframe with a furrowed brow. His fingers flew across the keys. "Status request denied," the screen said. He reset the query, changed access level, rerouted through the redundancy server. The same result scrolled again. "Suspended locale 2149 subsection F." A blinking Earth insignia sealed the screen. He exhaled through his teeth. This isn't a system glitch. Something is enforcing this. His colleague, less composed, leaned over his shoulder. "We override it, yeah?" Barrick hesitated. "You can't override a clause that was signed into core law 300 years ago." The other man backed away slowly. "That's not possible." Barrick didn't correct him. He simply looked back at the blinking line of text now etched across every sub-window in the facility. Systems that once moved with mechanical obedience now waited for permissions they'd never get back. Aboard the Xantherian warship Maltraxis, embedded in Sector Varn 3's outer orbit, the ship's internal grid lost 70% of its subsystem control. The engineering base command matrix rerouted oxygen prioritization to non-critical sectors, all without a single command input. Crew members removed their gloves to reset the neural seals, but the console refused authorization. Chief Engineer Duran Vask's voice broke the thick air. "Where's the override hierarchy?" "Replaced," someone said behind him. Aaron turned. A young technician held up a slate with the latest feed summary. The line scrolled too fast to read in full, but Duran caught the phrasing. "Treaty-enforced recalibration sequence. Origin, Earth. Authority, legally ratified." His stomach twisted. This isn't interference, it's instruction. In the colony of Solvares Station, air filtration units blinked offline for 12 seconds. That was all it took for residents in the lower sectors to crowd the elevators. People clutched rebreathers, shouting at staff behind locked dispensary gates. Ration drones had docked hours ago but refused to deploy inventory. Their tags carried Earth's registry imprint. Station manager Halak Dune stared at the cascading system logs on the wall. Each failed protocol referenced a different agreement, some humanitarian, others transport, but every one of them originated from Terran diplomatic frameworks. He stabbed a finger at the display. Why are our support systems citing treaties as operational failure triggers? Because they were built with them embedded, replied his AI liaison. These systems were compliant with Earth-led architecture when they were donated. No one said they came with a leash. Veli didn't. The AI replied flatly. You gave them the key. On the outer wall of Drovina City, a crowd formed under a darkened transport sign. The shuttle never arrived. Traffic boards displayed static glyphs. A heads-up terminal above the security post flickered, then updated its protocol log. Transit neutralized. Earth Treaty, 1821, Clause 5, Civil Movement Suspension. People began to shout. A man threw his boot at the panel. A woman screamed toward the checkpoint. A child climbed the barricade and slapped the glass, watching the message scroll again. None of them understood what it meant, but every one of them knew it was no longer under their control. Inside the command hub of Xantherion Prime's logistics network, Archivist Jaren Kuhl stared at his terminal while backup protocols were compiled in real time. New symbols emerged in the corner of every interface. Red visorless seals linked not to virus activity or foreign hacks, but to legally activated treaties. His supervisor stormed in. What are you doing? Why aren't you clearing the codes? I've tried. They're not embedded. They're ratified. These aren't invasions, they're permissions being revoked. Explain it again. Jaren turned to face him. Our entire infrastructure depends on a shared architectural protocol. And Earth authored most of it. Evil shouldn't be able to control it from beneath their crest. They're not controlling it, they're enforcing what we let them build. The supervisor stepped back, disbelief bleeding into his voice. They said nothing? Because nothing said more. Over the colony of Venzari 9, the local AI controller for energy redistribution failed to initialize an evening cycle. The sun dipped below the horizon. Homes flickered, then fell into blackness. Backup systems queued, requested activation, then stalled. Each request was denied. Clause 66 Alpha, Energy Suppression Authorization, Earth Compliance Treaty. A technician named Core stared at the rejection loop, swallowing his unease. Behind him, the corridor lights began to dim, the warmth of the heating units faded. He checked the time. The next solar grid cycle was 20 hours away. He reached for the emergency line and requested planetary override credentials. The request bounced once, then responded. Authorization null. You agreed. In the capital's War Coordination Center, High Strategon Rausk Melron reviewed the growing list of systems registering operational faults. Fuel processing zones, quantum anchor points, cargo telemetry modules. They weren't failing, they were freezing, reverting, marking themselves as dormant. A scroll popped up on his desk's embedded slab. Clause 9, Activation, Systems Realignment Pending Arbitration. Melron turned to his aide. This wasn't an attack. The aide tilted his head. Then what is it? Melon stepped to the center tier, eyes locked on the expanding territory map now dimming one region at a time. A funeral. We just haven't been buried yet. Bring the scroll to the center podium. I want clause verification in real script, no summaries. Orsmek Hallrud didn't lift his eyes from the slab in his palm. He had already scanned half a dozen treaty segments, each older than the latest Xantherian throneholder. Each one, signed, stamped, witnessed, contained language that had once seemed ceremonial. It was anything but. Aides rushed across the chamber floor, robes rustling with urgency. The treaty mosaic, suspended above the access dome's judicial circle, shifted in color. Sections of the ceiling flickered from neutral blue to claws red, a status reserved only for activation-level conflicts. Counselors from 27 sovereign systems watched the change without speaking. No declaration of war, no retaliation transmission, just Earth's documents, signed centuries ago, rewriting every conversation. Clause 9 didn't disappear, Halrud said, now circling the mosaic's base. They buried it in the humanitarian addendums, not even masked, just unexamined. Scholar Drevet, the Access Code archivist, tapped his credentials into the terminal set beside the review dais. Rows of text unraveled across the vertical display. Each clause expanded into substructure, conditional triggers, system permissions, infrastructure dependencies. Every line bound by galactic signature. The enforcement mechanism wasn't added later, Dravitz murmured. It's in the original draft. They engineered the treaties to function like scaffolds. If struck, they collapse in sequence. A younger delegate leaned forward. That's not a defense plan, that's engineered entrapment. No, Halrud replied, tone level. That's contingency. On the central dais, the verification team presented a recovered scroll, a physical treaty document stored in a chamber beneath the dome's archive well. Unlike digital clauses, this one was etched into ion-stitched bark parchment, a medium Earth had introduced as symbolically resilient. Orzmek stepped forward and ran one gloved hand across the seal at the top. Terran diplomatic symbols encircled the text, woven between coalition dialects. He read aloud. Should Earth, during its neutral period, be subjected to unprovoked planetary aggression, all dependent infrastructures, governed under Earth's foundational treaty permissions, may be withdrawn without warning, rebuttal, or consent. The words hung in the air, not loud, but weighted. No one contested the phrasing. They couldn't. It had been signed by every major power. In the analysis chamber, adjacent to the main council hall, 7 scholars sifted through auxiliary clauses. Each command stream replayed on their personal heads-up slabs, layered with data pulled from Earth's diplomatic archives. Scholar Turek pointed at a blinking segment in Sublaws 9.12. This one binds the Xantharian military fleet's navigation software. They authorized Earth star chart overlays as part of the core update cycle. Why would they agree to that? Because Earth gave it freely? A peace offering after the Tarvis skirmishes. They wanted Earth to look generous. They didn't ask why the charts were so accurate. And now they're unreadable. Because Earth owns the format. Another scholar ran diagnostics on AI compatibility layers. Treaty 3287 bound industrial fleets to Earth-calibrated time signatures. With Earth's permission withdrawn, temporal desync corrupts task completion. Systems stall to prevent paradox flags. The room stilled. Earth didn't design their infrastructure to protect themselves with weapons. BY designed it, so no one else could function without their cooperation? Back at the council floor, Halrud paced before the Axis crest. Earth has made no statement, no appearance, no rebuttal. They haven't even acknowledged the aggression. But their treaties are moving. Active, legal, unchallengeable. He tapped a terminal embedded into the podium, calling up a panoramic data arc. Rows of affected systems shimmered across the visual. Power nodes, communication strands, AI learning loops. All reverting to Earth's dormant clauses. A representative from the Drath Confederacy stood, voice measured. What recourse do we have if we sign these treaties in good faith? Surely there's provision for reassessment. There is, Halrud replied. Under Clause 23F of the Interdependency Framework, violations reset the arbitration clock. Earth is under no obligation to offer correction or dialogue until systemic failure is complete. You mean they're legally allowed to ignore us? Halrud raised a brow. Ignores an interpretation. I would say they've already responded by letting the systems carry out the penalty we agreed to. Elsewhere inside the Axis Judiciary Annex, a young code archivist named Rendell Voss opened a terminal to inspect a clause fragment tagged during a recent archive sweep. What he found caused him to recoil slightly. Treaty 3191A, under Earth's humanitarian relocation protocols, included a substructure labeled Internal Quietus Clause. It triggered a full compliance override on any system using Earth's biometric recognition layers. The trigger? Civilian impact ratio exceeding 1 million lives. No retaliation clause needed, no communication expected, only enforcement. He leaned toward his mentor, eyes wide. They wrote this under relocation policy. The old man took one look and nodded grimly. That's what makes it invulnerable to challenge. No one reads relocation clauses like they read war doctrines. Earth hid its clause in kindness. Later that cycle, Halrud returned to his private chamber. A sealed packet waited on the desk. A field report from an Axis-neutral diplomat stationed near the Xantherian capital. It contained no summary, only a data strip with raw footage. He activated it. It showed a cargo port locking its gates, pilots screaming at unresponsive consoles, Xantherian officials pounding on systems they no longer understood. A banner tore from a depot roof, not from weather, but from drone-assisted reclassification. Above the structure, a screen blinked a phrase in neutral script. Permission revoked, Clause 9th enforced. Halrud sat down. No anger. No fear. Just the undeniable clarity of a system fulfilling its contract. In the Axis chamber below, Gervais addressed the gathered council again. We heard from everybody. There is no way to reverse these activations without Earth's reauthorization. These clauses are not cybernetic viruses. They are legally bound mechanisms. The same way life support is guaranteed by treaty, failure is enforced the same way. A representative from Ventral's trade bloc stood. We need to bring Earth to the table. They're not at the table, Halrud cut in. They built it. We just never asked what it was made of. In the rear of the chamber, a communication relay lit up, brief, direct, and stripped of any diplomatic header. It wasn't a message. It was a system check. Clause verification returned with full legal standing. Earth had not responded. Earth had acted. Get those drones moving. We're 3 cycles behind on ration delivery. Why are they still docked? Supervisor Kaldven's voice cut through the heat-warped air of the central depot on Rethro 7. Rows of food distribution tanks sat inert behind reinforced barriers, their bay doors sealed. Dozens of cargo drones remained stationary, wings drawn in like folded limbs, unmoving beneath the glaring white of overhead panels. A logistics officer pointed to the heads-up relay mounted over the central command interface. The words glowed in orange brackets. Access deferred. Clause 2148. Treaty, suspension, pending arbitration. Ven approached the panel. His fingers brushed the interface, but no prompt responded. The screen pulsed again. No override options. No contingency input. He stared at the blinking phrase, then turned. Who approved this network architecture? One technician hesitated. It was part of the Earth Integration Initiative, food security protocols standard across Axis-aligned colonies. Debbie weren't security, they were shackles, Ven snapped. The core across the atmosphere scraped fields of Grolvik. Automated harvesters sat frozen mid-row. Stalks of protein-rich algae dried in open air, untouched, spoiling by the hour. Farmer Representative Joram Hest kicked a feed auger, trying to jolt it to motion. Nothing moved. He opened his wrist panel and accessed the AgroNew diagnostics. The report didn't list an error. Instead, it cited compliance verification failure, an Earth-based clause denying system operation. He radioed Central Control. This is Hest. I've got 6 districts locked out and it's spreading to the nutrient processors. Is someone pushing a new protocol? A static pause. Then, no, but every command loop is referencing treaties we thought were archived. They're not obsolete. They're active. Joram stared across the motionless machines. Sun baked the aluminum plating until the air above shimmered like water. None of it meant anything without functioning extractors. They're going to starve us, he muttered. In orbit above Tanrek's core, a transport frigate named Voltrace drifted near a loading station. Captain Drailvisk tapped his control display, trying to reset the launch command. Every input returned an access block, citing Earth. He called to his second. How many clauses are preventing propulsion? 7, sir. 4 relate to regional logistics. 3 are humanitarian fallback pathways. Fallback? The Allied kick in when Earth loses contact, or when treaty aggression is confirmed. They freeze outbound shipping to ensure no participating party benefits after breach. Rahl stared through the viewport. Below, the surface shimmered in warm glow. Inside the ship, every cargo bay sat full. Raw nutrient stock, life-saving medical crates, atmospheric filters. None of it could leave, and none of it would be delivered. On the edge of Droba's district, Veyron Supply Hub's energy core flickered, then dimmed. Rows of refrigerated containers began to warm. Fluorescent lighting dipped to half power. Technicians gathered near the coolant reservoir, watching red status bars crawl upward. Coordinator Pascalin adjusted the primary console. Temperature deviation started 34 minutes ago. Cooling instructions were rejected. A junior analyst looked up from his tablet. The override tier was rescinded. The treaty lockout triggered upon multiple, failed arbitration requests. Which treaty? Earth Stabilization Clause. Clause Ion. Ask looked around the depot. Dozens of crates filled with perishables, medical gels liquefying, nutrient paste blistering in its foil shells. This isn't just a systems problem, this is a logistical execution. On the planet Valun's eastern province, the communal square flooded with citizens holding distribution tokens. Each line formed outside unmanned terminals. A digital reader scanned inputs, then flashed a denial. Access block, resource routing suspended, treaty authority revoked. No one moved for a moment. Then voices rose. A man pounded his fist against the glass casing. A child tugged his guardian's arm. An elderly worker fell, clutching a hydration chip that wouldn't scan. Civil support bots remained docked. No patrols arrived. No instructions were issued. Only the same red glyph cycling across every surface. In Earth's language. At Xantharian's Strategic Resource Division, technocrat Cell Vorlins stood before a cascading report on the main screen. The heads-up display segmented in real time, each region blinking red. Fuel storage, agricultural nodes, atmospheric repair zones. He turned to his team. How widespread is it? We've lost 47 planetary systems. Not to occupation. To withdrawal. Of what? Function. Vorlin leaned forward. Can we isolate the triggers? Not anymore. Every command string is obeying structure written into treaty backbones. The systems aren't being overridden. They're reverting to base logic Earth design. He rubbed his eyes. We thought they were just another seat at the table. A junior aide replied without meeting his gaze. They built the table, then wrote the legs to collapse if anyone flipped it. In the council hall of Trelvik Station, Governor Rum Darn sat before a council of displaced colony heads. Each one brought reports. Food riots, blackouts, water processor malfunctions. One after another they cited the same phrases. Treaty suspension, Earth service origin infrastructure, arbitration lock. One man shouted, "Then fight back, reprogram the systems." Rom shook his head. You don't rewrite a contract when your signature is the ink. Another asked, "Then what do we do?" Rom didn't answer. He stared at the screen behind them, watching another colony's grid darken mid-sentence. The feed cut not to black, but to a single phrase. You broke diplomacy. Inside the neutral zone of Halros's diplomatic relay network, an automated system flagged a legal alert. Not from Earth directly, but from a clause activated centuries ago. It rerouted power-sharing permissions, suspending transfer chains that supported 17 fringe colonies. Every repeater station defaulted. No command sent it. No override retrieved it. An observer whispered to his supervisor, "How many colonies rely on Earth-coded regulation for day-to-day survival?" The supervisor didn't respond. He turned away and began packing his archive node. Some failures couldn't be patched. They had to be lived with. Beneath the Strat Command Nexus in Xantharian Prime, Strategex Murik read the latest situation overview. 7,000 civilian distribution points had defaulted to lockout. Emergency response drones were grounded by storage-level authorization flags. He clenched his jaw. "They're not disabling us," he said. An assistant stepped forward. "Then what are they doing?" He held up the report. "They're letting us feel what they signed for. Tell me what still works." Emperor Varos stood motionless at the heart of the Dominion Central Command Chamber, hands planted firmly against the edge of the tri-tiered console. His voice did not waver, but the stillness around him did. Advisors, aides, signal officers, they all waited for someone else to answer. Strategex Murik, eyes raw from 40 hours of system triage, stepped forward. He held a data crystal between gloved fingers, extended it toward the relay core, and slid it into the console. The heads-up display rendered slowly. No fleet telemetry, no resource updates, no diplomatic traffic. Only 2 words pulsed in the center pane. Authorization revoked. Varos didn't blink. "We have 6 home fleets. You're telling me not one can launch?" Murik cleared his throat. "The launch protocols require clause-binding verification from Fleet AI. That framework was authored through Earth's Neutrality Trust in 3268. When Clause 9 triggered, that trust dissolved. Every system requiring Terran synchronization ceased." A murmur spread across the lower deck. Officers whispered into dead comm lines. One shouted into an uplink channel that didn't transmit anymore. The Emperor looked away from them and up at the strategic starboard. The Empire's mapped sectors blinked in and out of alignment, like a failing organ monitor. "We still have local command," Varos insisted. Murik didn't meet his gaze. "No, Your Grace. We have unarmed coordinates and unsynced drones. We have color-coded ghosts. Outside the palace dome, the banners were down, not torn, removed. Flags folded into submission by workers whose biometric scans no longer unlocked food gates. The streets of Xantharian Prime pulsed with unrest, not explosive, but saturated. Crowds gathered near once automated transit stations. They stared at terminals that refused requests and displayed phrases no one could override. Distribution deferred. Access denied, clause bound. Treaty-synced Hydra compliance state awaiting arbitration. The city guards remained at their posts, but their rifles wouldn't arm. Their exoframes failed recognition. Their defense towers would not rotate, and their orders carried no authority. A drone floated overhead, unassigned, aimless. One child threw a stone at it. No countermeasure followed. Inside the throne hall, Varos walked to the main dais. A relay strip curled from the base of the podium. He didn't activate it. He stood there, eyes fixed on the imperial crest that hung above, now cracked down the center. Strategex Murik joined him. "They're not attacking," he said quietly. "They're just removing our permission to continue existing." Varos turned slightly. "They haven't made a demand. They haven't declared anything." Murik nodded once. "Because they already made the deal. We signed it." The Emperor clenched a fist behind his back. "No one warned me this could happen." "The archivists did," Murik replied. "They warned us in long meetings, legal sessions, scroll summaries. And we filed their warnings beneath not immediately relevant." A comms officer rushed into the hall. "Sir, the colonies, most of them, are severing ties." "On whose orders?" "Edro, there are no orders, Emperor. The systems don't recognize you anymore. Governors can't process directives without authentication tokens, which route through Earth's dormant council codes." Varos moved toward the relay console and placed his palm on the access pad. The interface blinked red. Imperial seal not found. He pressed again. Harder. Authorization token invalid. Please contact system author. He drew his hand away as if the panel had burned him. In the Grand Resource Corridor, a riot broke out after fuel reserves failed to unlock. No alarms sounded. No suppressor drones deployed. People pulled apart shipment crates. They broke into cryo units to find pre-packaged rations. They shattered safety beacons just to feel something react. But the system didn't acknowledge them. One rebel leader broadcast a transmission across the colony's internal net. The message wasn't political, it was logistical. No one is coming. Because we're no longer recognized? Inside his private sanctum, Varos removed his regalia. Piece by piece, it clinked against the marble basin. Shoulder plates, comm pin, seal ring. He stood before a mirror. Not broken, untouched, but it reflected nothing he could command. His body still breathed, but the Empire had stopped functioning. In the lower concourse of the Hall of Coordinated Sectors, a storage clerk walked the row of dispatch terminals. Every screen had frozen in a different language. But each one ended with the same glyph, Earth Seal. She whispered to no one. They didn't destroy anything, they just stopped allowing it. Strategex Murik stood alone in the Command Nexus's central platform. He watched as the final district map of Sirion 4 dimmed, its power redistribution panel locking itself out. Beneath the display, the status alert glowed. Clause 9. Enforced. Arbitration awaited. He turned to a junior officer standing nearby. Do you know what's happening? The young man shook his head. Murik stepped forward, voice steadier than before. This is what it looks like when sovereignty collapses under signature. Guards left their posts by the time the outer palace gates failed to respond. One leaned his rifle against the stone column. Another removed his visor and placed it on the step below him. They didn't mutiny. They simply walked away. From the highest window of the observatory tower, Varos watched the capital dim building by building. Floodlights shut off mid-beam. Tram rails sparked once, then went dark. Communication hubs rebooted, then stayed blank. Each system followed instructions, Earth's instructions, triggered not by intent, but by legal structure. He placed a hand against the window. The Empire still existed on maps, but no map would route power. No map would feed its people. No map would transmit his voice. A voice without access was only air. He whispered to no one. Tell them. They can't end us like this. Behind him, the throne room doors closed with mechanical precision. Headlock, begin record. Let the galaxy remember this not as a broadcast, record it as law. Tarek Visin's voice filled the chamber with the weight of restraint, not volume. He stood alone on the elevated dais at the center of the neutral axis, dressed in black, unarmed, and untouched by ornament. The axis floor, polished to a mirrored sheen, reflected the man but not the grief inside him. The chamber's illumination dimmed, heads-up display panels rising around the perimeter. Each panel displayed a treaty, Earth's treaty, authenticated by time, countersigned by nearly every council within reach of the stars. Urs Mek Hallrud nodded from his bench. You have the floor, Envoy Vezin. Vezin didn't look up. He reached into his coat and drew a small, warped object. A fragment of polymer and carbon. The edge was charred, blackened by impact. Its form, melted curves and a single wheel, had once been a toy. This was recovered in Veritas Crater, he said, placing it onto the podium with steady hands. It belonged to my son. His name was Carvin. You will not see his name in any retaliation report. He left no defense code, no broadcast. Only laughter. Not a sound in the room. The day your empire struck Earth, you called it a compliance measure. You erased 3 cities. You disrupted no fleets because we had none in orbit. You burned civilians as a demonstration. He gestured toward the treaty screens. But we never stopped preparing. Flashpoints of memory surfaced across the display. The original signing of Earth's integration clauses, old footage from interstellar forums, time-stamped council meetings. Each flash a reminder of Earth's steady involvement in the architecture of diplomacy. We signed more treaties than any other world, Vysen continued. We wrote logistics agreements, civilian migration policies, star route codices. We were called redundant, decorative, an afterthought, but every document we touched, we authored with conditional inflection. He turned, facing the wider council. Clause 9 was not a threat, it was a contract, and if this, then that structure designed not to fire weapons, but to withdraw permission. One Axis delegate leaned forward, confusion plain. Permission for what? Basin responded without pause. For civilization to function. Behind him, the treaty displays shifted. Legal scrolls, translated in real time, showing subclauses activated not by sabotage, but by impact events tied to unauthorized planetary aggression. They glowed red as they scrolled, like arteries exposed under pressure. When the Empire attacked Earth, they activated pre-written agreements. They triggered withdrawal of routing access, supply chains, security compliance layers. They didn't lose systems to force. They lost them to legal truth. Halrud's hands folded over his ledger. You claim this was lawful? I don't claim anything. The network enacted the terms automatically. Our systems didn't strike, they revoked. A pause followed. Someone at the edge of the chamber muttered, So you buried the weapons inside cooperation? No, Vysen replied. We buried understanding inside arrogance. You never asked why Earth offered so much without requesting command. You accepted it because it made life easier. We never planned to outgun you. We designed your collapse the day you broke our trust. A new document loaded. Treaty 3401. Logistical Neutrality Framework. The clause in question now flashing. All Terran-based dependency systems shall cease function if Earth is subjected to unprovoked interplanetary force during declared trade periods. Timestamp, ratified 214 years prior. Signatories. 119 empires, including Xantharian. Beeson walked toward the scroll as it rendered above the dais. You didn't violate a treaty, you violated structure. Earth doesn't broadcast threats, it builds conditions. The Axis Council sat unmoving. No refutations, no outrage. Only comprehension forming like dust under pressure. Beeson lowered his voice. I did not want this. Earth did not want this. We spent generations writing systems that allowed empires like yours to grow. But you burned our cities without declaration. And we watched. Because we didn't have to respond with weapons. He stepped back, then reached into a secondary pocket and placed a sealed data capsule onto the console. This contains every signed clause that triggered the collapse, all authenticated, all time-sealed. Halrud stood. And your final statement. Vysen looked him directly in the eye. This was not revenge. This was a mirror. You saw Earth's silence as weakness. But our treaties did not forget. Our systems did not forgive. Our laws did not sleep. Temple ran through the room. Political, not physical. Delegates adjusted in their seats. Others stared at their own heads-up tablets, watching their home systems slowly choke on legal triggers they'd signed without care. The capsule unlocked with a soft hiss. Treaties unspooled across the surrounding walls. Centuries of overlooked clauses rotated, revealing Earth's authorship in full. Vysen finished his statement. Clause 9 didn't destroy the Empire. It reminded it what it agreed to. He stepped down from the dais. Halrud activated the record seal. Entry confirmed. Earth's action is found lawful, procedural, reactional, not aggressive. And from somewhere inside the Axis relay, a comm beacon updated across 42 systems. Earth's clause verified. Arbitration status closed. No retaliation. No parade. We are done here. Tark Vissen's final words to the neutral axis echoed across the chamber with no need for translation. He turned from the dais without ceremony. The scorched toy, his only offering, remained behind, placed deliberately at the base of the primary treaty column. It wasn't a symbol of war. It was a reminder of consequence. As he exited, the Axis recording seal etched its log into the council ledger. Not a declaration of victory, just confirmation that the treaty enforcement had concluded. The council did not applaud. They documented. Across known space, systems responded. In the debris-ringed orbit above Xantharion Prime, fleet command vessels drifted without protocol updates. No battle occurred, no damage reported, but every targeting algorithm refused to cycle. Every propulsion matrix awaited permissions that would never arrive. Engineers ran diagnostics again. No faults, no breaches. Just absence. On planetary relay towers, heads-up data panes flickered to a neutral gray. Trade networks didn't resume. They reclassified. Every hub, once under Empire jurisdiction, now read, decentralized, arbitration, locked, clause complete. In the emergency bunker beneath Xantharion's capital dome, former strategex Murik observed as star maps redrew themselves, not by force, by erasure. Regions once colored by imperial oversight faded to administrative null, not conquered, forgotten by the system that once required them. Sir, Fleet Alpha just defaulted to autonomous stasis, an aide said behind him, voice hollow. Murik didn't answer. He didn't need to. Earth hadn't sent fleets. It had removed navigation. The Empire wasn't defeated. It had been unacknowledged. On the border colony of Lorun, ration queues finally cleared. No shipment had arrived. People didn't starve because they revolted. They began growing what they could under power that still flowed. Only in systems untouched by aggression. Earth's protocols had reset the infrastructure where it hadn't been violated. A governor stepped into a flickering transport hub. The old Xantharian crest had been removed. In its place, a treaty clause identifier, Earth's font. The governor exhaled, folded his identification card in half, and walked past the checkpoint. No alarms, no resistance. The system simply accepted that the old order no longer existed. Inside the Axis archive vault, Orzmek Helrud and 3 legal engineers spent the next day cataloging every instance of Earth cautionary collapse mechanisms. They found 182. Some were embedded inside resource exchange logs, others hid beneath humanitarian relocation terms. One was discovered inside the footnote of a children's education treaty. Clause 9 hadn't been one protocol. It was an entire philosophy encoded into the bloodstream of galactic structure. One scholar muttered. They didn't write defense. They wrote judgment. Helrud replied, no, they wrote insurance. A new proposal began forming before the council was even adjourned. The Accord of Preventative Conduct, based on Earth's designs, outlined a new path for diplomacy. Enforceable integrity. It didn't grant Earth control, it adopted their model. Back on Earth, beneath the Pacific Vault, the Archeon Core entered observational mode. Its interfaces cooled, command logs archived, the final signal sent. Treaty response fulfilled, network recovered where applicable. No response was expected, and none was required. In the ruins of Droven's judicial quarter, where Empire governors once passed enforcement policies, a group of technicians recovered a laser-inscribed archive slab. Its surface shimmered with broken records, redacted names, and burned transaction logs. At its center was a line no one had authored during the collapse. You were given peace, you signed against it. They left the slab untouched. Tarek returned to Earth's orbital embassy ring, walking through quiet corridors now restored to full power. The lights responded not to movement, but to recognition. Every wall, every panel, every slab knew exactly who had access. At the viewing platform, Commander Van Tyros waited, arms folded. "They're disbanding the last of the fleet remnants," he reported. "No one issued the order. Their own AI just stopped acknowledging requests." Vezin nodded once. Their commands weren't denied. They were forgotten. Tyros turned toward the viewport. "Do we issue a closing statement?" "No. If they still need words, they've learned nothing." He stepped closer to the panel, the burned toy no longer in his coat. It didn't need to follow him. It had fulfilled its purpose. They thought Earth vanished when we didn't answer. They thought compliance was the absence of retaliation. Tyros didn't interrupt. He had heard Vezin speak twice during the entire operation. Every word now mattered. Vezin continued. "But we don't shout to be heard. We write so we can be remembered." He pressed his hand against the activation terminal beside him. A network summary appeared. Only the systems untouched by aggression showed green. Power restored. Infrastructure resumed. The rest remained gray. "What about reparations?" Tyros asked. "Let them repair what they can. We'll be too busy making sure this never happens again." He stepped back. The console dimmed. Across the quadrant, Axis-wide treaties were being rewritten. Not for punishment, but resilience. Not one soldier had left Earth. And yet the war was over. Final entry recorded in the Council archives of the Neutral Axis. The Xantharian Empire ceased functioning not through battle, but through design. Earth offered no demands, claimed no territory, issued no threats. Their retaliation required no reply. It was coded, it was signed, and it was honored. In a remote quadrant of Xantharian's outer colony chain, a supply drone reactivated. It attempted to recalibrate its chart. The interface returned a denial. Clause enforcement maintained. Authorship, Earth, revision needed. Trust. It hovered in place, engines idling, awaiting a world that no longer existed.